What's up? This is the chop saw. The first thing that you want to make sure of is that when you are cutting on this machine, that your board is flat against the table and flat against the back fence of this chop saw.
What up, guys? This piece of wood, too short to cut on the chop saw. Okay, this is like 5 inches. We can't cut anything less than 8 inches. So this big piece, awesome. Okay, we want to make sure that our fingers are far enough away, 8 inches.
The next thing that you want to make sure of is that you are not cutting a board that is warped or twisted. If you look at these boards, this one is nice and flat. If I tap it, it doesn't bounce up and down. This one, however, is a little bit warped and a tiny bit twisted. So make sure that you are cutting boards that are nice and straight and that are not warped and twisted.
All right, fourth try, I'm sure I'll get it right. You want to make sure that you keep your fingers 6 inches away from the blade. Okay. You also might want to use this clamp. This clamp right here by Festool is really nice. You press down on it, it locks it. Okay, nice and tight for us, and then we can cut.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a clarification for the test. When it's a short piece like this, what you're going to be doing is you're just going to go straight down like this. When it is a longer piece, the correct order of events, and this is the answer on the quiz, is that you will want to be pulling the saw all the way out, turning it on and plunging it all the way down, and then pushing it forward.
All right, so when you come to the saw, first thing you want to do is look to see that everything is clear on the top. You can obviously see from here that there is sawdust and little chips of wood. Okay, so we want to wipe that off, blow it if we need to, so we have a nice flat surface for us to put our wood down on and up against the fence.
Okay, so something else to keep in mind is that you never want to make a rip cut on the miter saw. What that means is that if you take a look at this board, if you can see, the grain is moving in this direction. The grain is moving in this direction. A rip cut means that you are cutting it with the grain. So on the chop saw, we are always cutting things against the grain or making cross cuts. So you do not want to set your piece of wood like this with the grain running this way. That is the wrong way. You always want to make sure that you are making cross cuts with the grain running perpendicular to the blade.
So when we are cutting, we want to secure the wood. We want to hold it securely, and we want to cut in a controlled manner. So you're not going to be here and like slamming it through. Okay, you're going to be nice and down, nice and easy. Okay, at a medium controlled pace.
Hello everybody, this is the bandsaw. The first thing you want to make sure on the bandsaw is that you set the blade guard 1/4 of an inch above the piece of wood that you are cutting. So you come like this. You want to make sure that you lower the blade guard so that it is about 1/4 of an inch above the piece of wood that you're cutting.
Hey guys, we are talking about the bandsaw, and when you are making a cut on the bandsaw and you're cutting a piece of wood, doesn't matter if it's soft or hardwood, you never want to back out of the cut. So if you look at the board right now, I've started to cut at an angle, and if I am going in the wrong direction, I want to turn the machine off and wait for it to stop, and then I want to gently back my piece out, okay? I don't want to do that when the machine is turned on because it'll snap the blade or bend it.
Like we already talked about, when you're on the bandsaw, you want to make sure that you adjust the safety guard and then lock it in place.
All right, after you are done cutting, okay, and this machine is on, you need to do two things. First, you need to wait till the machine stops running, okay? Then you need to take the blade guard and you need to lower it down, okay? So that none of the blade, not much of the blade is shown.
Another thing to make sure on the bandsaw is that your fingers are always at least 2 inches away from the blade. If you're cutting a very small piece and your fingers are closer than that, you need to not cut this piece.
When you're cutting on this bandsaw, you never want to allow anyone to stand on the right side of the blade right here. The reason for that is if the blade breaks, it's going to come out this way and you could be hurt. Okay, so no one stands here.
If you're making sharp turns on the bandsaw, you have the potential to break the blade, so when you're making sharp turns, you want to first make relief cuts. That's what those little blue cuts were, and now I can very easily cut the rest of the piece.
Hey teacher, this machine is clicking or it's sparking, something is not right. I'm turning it off and I need to talk to you. Go.
On our bandsaw, the only adjustment that you guys can make is to the height of the blade guard. Once again, I'm talking about the blade guard. All of the other adjustments are forbidden. This one is forbidden, this one is forbidden. Don't touch them.
If you're cutting your wood on the bandsaw and it starts to bind, meaning the wood is pressing on the blade and it's making it really hard and it's like hard to hold, don't force the wood forward. Turn the machine off, wait for it to stop, okay, and then carefully back your blade out like this so that you don't snap the blade.
If you guys remember the cut that I made earlier, I cut on the outside of that line. The reason I did this is so that I can come over to the sanders later and get this to be exactly where I want it to be. If I cut the line off, the piece is not going to be the exact shape or size that I want it to be.
Hey guys, we're talking about the jointer today. First and most important thing on the jointer is that the blade guard moves freely and works properly so that your fingers are never by the exposed blade.
Hey guys, for demonstration purposes, I put this piece of orange tape here. You want to make sure that your fingers are always at least 3 inches away from the blade.
So hey guys, we have a piece of board here. You can see the end grain, okay? End grain, would be the face grain, this would be the edge, but these ones are cut. We would never joint this end grain this way, ever, 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 okay? We always want the grain to be going in the direction, okay, this way. If we want to cut this edge, we would use the chop saw.
Something else to make sure of on the jointer is that our fence is always locked in place. If it is moving when we're cutting, that is bad. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we pull this back and that it's always locked in place.
Okay, so the smallest piece of wood that we can use is one that is 8 inches this way. If it's shorter than 8 inches, we cannot joint it. Okay, we have to do something else. This is 9 inches, so we can joint it here, okay, like this.
Something you want to pay attention to on the piece of wood that you've selected is that there's no metal in your piece of wood, that there's no loose knot holes, and that there's no paint or varnish. Sometimes pieces of wood have little staples in them or nails, or it's an old piece of wood that has paint or varnish on it. Make sure that you do not joint those pieces.
When using the jointer, you want to make sure that you're standing in the right place. Okay, so I don't want to be back here trying to push this board. I want to be standing next to the jointer, and I want to be in an athletic stance, and I want to move with the board as I go, okay, to make sure that it's cutting properly.
When you're using the jointer and you have a piece of wood that is not taller than this fence, you must use a push stick to push it through nice and easy.
When you're using the jointer also, you never want to stop a cut in the middle. So I wouldn't push this through and stop right here, okay? And I would also never want to back out because the knife itself will cut deeper into your wood. It'll make a gouge in it.
So when we are jointing the face grain of a block, we want to make sure that we use a push block. If you look at this push block, there are little catches on this push block, so we want to make sure that we link that into place and that we push this through nice and evenly. That way we can keep our fingers far enough away from the cutter head.
Hey guys, we're talking about the planer today. First thing you want to do is if your board for some reason gets stuck, okay, you don't want to undo this crank. You just want to turn off the machine, wait for it to stop, then adjust the height and pull your piece out.
So this planer is spinning super fast. So something you want to be careful of is that you do not bend down like this and peek into the machine, because this piece of wood could shoot back out and hit you in the face. So you never want to look into the machine while it is running.
When you are planing, you never want to adjust the height more than a half turn. So I'm going from the top where this handle is, just to right there, okay? If we do more than that, it takes off too much.
When you are planing a board and you are halfway through the board going into the machine, if it were to get stuck or something, kind of what we talked about earlier, you never want to adjust the height and make the height deeper in the middle of one of your cuts. You always want to let the board run all the way through first.
When using the planer, okay, your piece of wood needs to be 8 inches or longer. Okay, this is too short. If this piece goes through, it's gonna get stuck in there and the blades are gonna snipe it. They're gonna cut a groove out of it, okay? So we wanna use pieces that are longer, okay? Plane everything down and then cut it up on the chop saw.
Back to our warped and twisted board. This board is very warped, so we cannot use it on this planer to start out with. What we have to do first is we have to make sure that we joint one face on the jointer.
Again, if your wood gets stuck in the planer, okay, you need to turn it off and you need to wait for the machine to stop running. Then you can adjust the height and pull your piece out safely.
When you are feeding a piece through on the planer, you want to make sure that the blades are running perpendicular to the piece of wood that you are cutting. So you can send it through this way, you cannot send it through this way.
If your piece of wood has any metal on it, like staples or screws or nails, any glue, any finish, okay, like a spray finish or a paint finish, you have to scrape that off or sand that off before you can run this through. Otherwise, it will chip the blades in here, okay, and ruin it.
So we've not actually talked about what the purpose of this machine is in this entire video yet. The purpose of this machine is to take a piece of wood that is this thick and turn it down to this thick. So something to keep in mind is the face that is going to be shaved off is the top. The blades are up on the top of this machine, so the top is what is going to be
Cutting.
cutting. This is the router table. When you're using the router table, something that is a good idea is to always get a scrap piece of wood to make a practice cut on before you use your real piece.
Important to remember that the cutter head, which is this router bit, is moving in a clockwise motion, okay? So that's why we're pushing our piece from the right to the left.
The speed and the depth of the cut that you are making is going to largely depend upon the type of wood that you are cutting, whether you're using a hardwood or a softwood.
Always want to check the alignment of the fence. Make sure that it's in the right spot and it's 90 degrees to the bit.
Something else, you want to always keep your fingers away from the router bit when it is moving. Just don't.
When using the router machine, the router table, you never want to hold your piece over here on the left side, okay? You don't want to be like this, okay? You always want to be on the right side, pushing through your piece.
When you're cutting on the router, you want to make sure that the cullet, which is this little deal right there, is fully tightened before you start operating the router. Make sure it is fully tightened.
You never want to start the machine when your piece of wood is touching the router bit. So you always want to start after, sorry.
No, you did. The correct direction to push things through on this router table is from right to left. You never want to be pushing things through back this opposite direction because the blade is moving this way and it could pull your fingers into the router bit, which would be very bad.
So when you are putting in your router bit, you want to make sure there's a little gap there, okay? That it's not all the way pressed down tight.
You want to make sure that everything is fully and securely attached. You want to make sure that your fence is locked in place. You want to make sure that your bit is all tight in there. You want to make sure that everything is humming.
So when the belt and disc sander is on, you would never want to touch any of these surfaces with your hand, okay? Because they're obviously moving very fast and you'll hurt yourself.
When using this machine, you must always keep the piece that you're sanding firmly on the table. You don't want to be up here like this, trying to get this perfectly. You want to make sure it's nice and flat on this table.
When you're using the belt and disc sander, you do not want to sand anything that is an irregular shape. This would be an irregular shape, okay, that would make it hard for you to hold at times and get into the corners. Okay, you obviously can't get into that corner. So you want to use something that is a regular shape and size so that you have full access on your sanding.
You never want to sand more than 1/8 of an inch off on this machine. So I can't turn this into a circle because that would be sanding off way more than 1/8 of an inch. So make sure you keep it limited to 1/8 of an inch.
When you're sanding your piece, you want to make sure that you keep your fingers at least 1 inch away. So I would never want to be standing like this, okay, because my fingers are super close. I want to have my fingers back here like this and sanding.
All right, you do not want to force your object into the sander. If you are pushing on this with all of your strength, you're gonna burn your piece, you're gonna break the sander, something's gonna go wrong, so make sure you're going nice and gently and not forcing your piece into the sander.
Only one person can use the sander at a time. So there can't be one person here and another person here sanding at the same time.
This sander moves in this direction. So when you're using this sander, you want to make sure that you stay on this left side when it is moving in the downward position. If you bring it on this side, it's going to come up like this. And throw your piece all the way over there.
As it would be for any tool in the shop, you never want to leave a tool while it's still running. Wait till the machine completely stops, and then I can walk away.
Bye. Like we talked about before, you want to make sure that you are applying a gentle pressure, not forcing your piece in, and you are always sanding with the grain.
So the saw must be completely stopped, okay, before making any adjustments to the fence, okay, before setting up any jigs, anything like that.
Along the same line of thought, you never want to adjust or move the blade guard until the blade comes to a full and complete stop.
Okay, a rule of thumb in how high the blade should be is that it should be a 1/4 inch above your wood. So that is the bottom of this gullet, okay, right there, that's what it should look like.
The wood that you are cutting must always be at least 6 inches long. If you're trying to cut something that is less than 6 inches, come and ask me or Molkoy.
When using the table saw, your fingers must be at least 4 inches away from the blade. So that means that this distance here needs to be 4 inches. Okay, if it's greater than 4 inches and the board is wider, it's okay for you to use your push stick, and out here too, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be safe.
You want to make sure that you are always using one of our push sticks when you are making a cut on the table saw. If it's a nice thin piece of wood, you can use this push stick, push it through all the way. Blade guard is in the way, but you get the point. If it is a wider piece of wood that this piece will fit onto, you can go ahead and use this push stick. This push stick is fantastic.
This is the table saw fence, and it needs to be parallel to the blade. That means they need to be going in the same direction. If they are not, then potentially wood could get turned and kick back out.
You want to make sure that you hold down your piece of wood securely. You don't want to hold it down all loose. You want to hold it down nice and securely and push it through nice and evenly.
So if your board is warped or twisted, bowed, cupped, whatever it would be, like this one is, it's rocking, okay? Before you use the table saw, you have to go to the jointer and you have to straighten this piece out, okay?
You never want to stand directly behind the blade. You want to always stand over here to the left-hand side. That way, in the odd chance that this shot backwards, it wouldn't hit you in the stomach.
are cutting a piece on the table saw, you want to make sure that you push your piece of wood all the way past the blade. So you're going to start here and you're going to push all the way through. Okay? You're going to raise your hand up, arm to the right and down.
You want to always make sure that our blade guard is in place. If you do not wish to use the blade guard, you can also use this splitter. Either one is fine, but you must make sure they are always in place.
This fence is not locked, okay, and it moves freely. In order for you to lock it, you got to push down on the red handle. That is secure, now it won't move.
When you are done pushing your board all the way through, I do not want you to reach over and grab this piece of wood. That would be a bummer. So make sure that you leave it out there on the off-feed table.
So the blade needs to be completely stopped, okay, before making any kind of adjustments with the fence itself, okay, with this feather board, setting it up, or if you have an off cut of your wood, okay, you do not reach for it when the blade is still spinning. You gotta wait till it turns off. Once it's stopped, then you can pull this off. When you are going to use the drill press, you always want to securely fasten your wood down to the table, okay, so that it does not move on you. And that's what it should look like.
It is extremely important to tie back all of your hair. Make sure you get all of your hair all nice and tied back. That way it doesn't get caught in this and then rip it out.
If you're using the drill press and you have loose clothing like a baggy sweatshirt or a jacket or a long sleeve shirt, it needs to be pushed up or removed. It needs to be removed so that it doesn't get stuck in the blade as well.
You want to make sure that the drill bit is always securely in the chuck using the chuck key. So you can tighten and loosen this. Just like that.
Make sure the drill bit's secure with the chuck key.
If in the middle of you drilling something, your piece of wood or your clamp comes loose and it starts shaking around, immediately turn off and wait for the thing to come to a complete stop.
Before turning on the drill press, you need to make sure that the chuck key is removed from the chuck itself. Otherwise, if it's in there, it will fly off. That's bad.
You should never wear gloves when using the drill press or any other machine for that matter. If you're wearing gloves, they could get caught in here and pull your hand into the drill bit.
When using the drill press, okay, bigger bits like this one, okay, can go at a slower speed. Thinner bits, smaller bits would go at a faster speed. That has to do with the size of the bit.
You want to make sure that you use a scrap piece of wood underneath the piece that you're trying to drill a hole in so that it doesn't blow out the bottom of your finished piece.
Today we're talking about the horizontal edge sander. When using this machine, you want to make sure you keep your hand over here on this side of the table so that it stops your wood, because the sander is going this way, so it wants to push this wood this way. Okay, so you have to keep your hand on the side right here so it doesn't fly off.
just like our other sanders, you want to make sure you keep your fingers at least 1 inch away from the sander. If your fingers are nice and close like this, you're probably going to sand your fingertips off. That'd be bad.
When using the sander, you want to make sure that the abrasive, which is your sandpaper, is 1/8 of an inch away, okay, from the top of the machine, okay, so that the sandpaper doesn't run into the metal.
When you are sanding on this machine, you want to make sure that you hold your piece firmly on the table. You don't want to come up like this, be all crazy and weird and twisty. You want to make sure it's nice and flat on the table.
Once again, like every other tool in the shop, you want to make sure that this tool, when it is running, that it comes to a complete stop before you walk away.
This tool can only be used by one person at a time.
So when using this machine, you want to make sure that at least one surface is flat. You don't want to sand something like this against the fence because it's going to move. You want to make sure it would be flat like that. Okay. Obviously, we'd need to figure out a different way to hold this.
Again, on this machine, you do not want to force anything into the sandpaper. Otherwise it will burn or break the sandpaper. You want to make sure you got it nice and gently and you are doing it nice and evenly.
When sanding on this machine, you want to make sure that you don't sand off more than 1/8 of an inch. So that's really a very, very small amount that you're sanding off on a machine like this.
If in the middle of you sanding something, the belt should rip or tear, you want to turn off the machine and do step back.